Today we're going to help keep our Project Black Pearl on the straight and narrow by upgrading some worn out steering components. This is our power rack and steering replacement kit fitting your 1985 through 1993 V8 Mustang. It includes a remanufactured steering rack along with standard bushings, along with the inner and the outer tie rods to get rid of that loose plate in the front of your steering. Now this is going to use the standard bushings with this kit, but it's also available with an offset and it'll be a direct replacement for the factory. This is a remanufactured unit with a 15:1 ratio. For this installation, they lift or a jack and jack stands, 3/8 ratchet, 11mm socket, 15mm socket, 18mm socket, 3/4 socket, 5/16 wrench, 15mm wrench, 11/16 wrench, 7/8 wrench, needle nose pliers, punch, hammer, and a pry bar. First thing we're going to do is get the car off the ground and remove the wheels. Now we have a lot of play in our inner tie rods, which is causing the car to wander going down the road. Plus the rack is leaking and has all the normal problems with Fox body rack. So the first step in the process, now that we have the wheels off, is remove the outer tie rods. And what you're going to want to do here is remove the cotter pin, then remove the nut below. You're going to hit right here on the spindle, and that'll separate the ball joint. To give you an idea of how bad this rack is, this is not normal. This should actually be quite firm and not have any play to it. As you can see, I'm not even sure it's attached. Probably shouldn't even have driven this car to work today. And now we're gonna go up in here, we're gonna separate the rag joint from the column itself. Now what you wanna do is turn the wheel until you can see that bolt you have to remove, then lock the wheel in place, which will make it easier to get it off. Since it's hard to see what we're doing, the bolt we just removed sits in this groove. So what we have to do now is get the rag joint off of these threads so we can remove the rack from the car. Usually it'll slide off, but given these cars are older and abused, sometimes you have to use a little punch and a hammer just to pop that off. I know we have to get the power steering lines disconnected from the rack, but the easiest way to do that is to remove these two nuts here. That allows us to slide the rack off the K-member, make it much easier to get to those lines. All right, now we can use a small pry bar and then remove the rack from the K-member. Okay, with the rack loose, we can disconnect our power steering lines. Make sure you have a drain pen underneath because they will drip a little. Brandon's case, probably a lot. The remanufactured steering rack includes these bushings here, which are basically the original rubber bushings with a metal sleeve. Now in our case, our kit you have, it's here at CJ Pony Parts, comes with these polyurethane bushings, which are much better. We're gonna be using these. We're ready to install our new rack. You wanna make sure you do not miss these two little plastic washers. These are gonna go onto your power steering lines before they connect to the rack. Forget these, it's gonna cause leaks and all kinds of problems. And you wanna make sure on these lines you remove the original washers and remove the original O-rings before you install the new ones. This is what it should look like when it's done. Make sure you have the washer on the top here and the O-ring on the bottom. Repeat the process with the other line. Okay, now you want to lift the rack up into place. With the rack up into place, now we're going to connect the power steering lines before we put it onto the studs. You want to make sure the lines are clear of your motor mount bracket and kind of get it up on the ends of the stud here. We're going to work it down onto it. All right, with the rack seated but not actually tightened down yet, now we're going to reconnect the bolt for the rack joint. All right, with the rack joint seated now on the rack, we can reinstall the set screw. All right, with the rack mounted and seated properly and our rack joint connected, we can hammer these bolts back through and install the washers and nuts. We're going to take the original jam nuts now from our factory rack, thread them on. We're going to go about halfway. This is actually what we'll do to adjust. Obviously, with something like this, since we're taking the steering apart, you are going to have to get an alignment when you're finished. So basically get it as straight as you can eye it up, and then get it to your local alignment shop before you put any kind of real miles on it. All right, once you get it where it looks pretty straight, jam that up against it. Thread our castle nut on, then tighten everything down. And once it's tight, we're going to reinstall the cotter pin. And the last step over here is to install the grease fitting. You want to grease the ball joint, top off your power steering fluid, get an alignment, and your installation is finished. As you saw when we took it apart, my rack and pinion kit on my 90LX was even in worse shape than I thought it was. This new rack and pinion is going to make the car a lot nicer on the highway. That water is going to go away, and it's going to be a lot safer as well. Like I said before, and I can't stress enough, after this installation, you will need an alignment before you put any kind of miles on the car. As far as the installation goes, I would say 2 to 3 hours and be back on the road in no time.